I'm Sue Fabian. I was born and raised in Southeast Michigan, and educationally I have a bachelor's in psychology, a master's in counseling, a certificate in gerontology, and a law degree. I was 40 years old when I went to law school. My thought was I'm going to be 5 years older anyway in 5 years, so I just want to go to law school. I went to law school out of personal experience. My mother had a devastating stroke in 1990. She was not expected to survive. And when it became apparent that she would survive, I was then told she'd spend the rest of her days in a nursing home. She was only 68 at the time. And her and I made quite a team. And the harder she worked, the harder I worked. And the harder I worked, the harder she worked during her very prolonged recovery. And in that experience and walking through the healthcare maze daily for weeks and months and years, I experienced many, many things in dealing with the healthcare profession and encountered situations that could have cost her her life despite my daily diligence in asking the right questions. And so I thought about all the elders out there that either don't have anyone going to bat for them or who have family members that just don't know or have the wherewithal to navigate a very complex and fragmented healthcare system. And so with all of that, I decided to go to law school so that I could be in a position to fully advocate for people. My elder law practice now consists mostly of elder law things that I do, contrasted with geriatric care management, which I did before I went into law school. And so now with these twin professions of geriatric care management and elder law, it really gives me a unique opportunity to facilitate the situations that elders find themselves in. So some of what I do is geriatric care management. A lot of what I do is elder law, but most of the time I'm doing something of each. And I'll give you one, for instance, a recent case that I had of a not so old elder, 75, around there, but had what I suspected and what her daughter suspected to be dementia, and she wanted to drive again. And her daughter had taken her car. And so there was this tremendous tension in the family between mom and daughters over this car. And this is a very central theme, as you can well imagine, for families when their older loved ones are starting to have problems. And so I'm doing a little bit of counseling. I have a degree in counseling. I'm doing a little bit of care management, and I'm doing a little bit of elder law. And it all weave together as I tried to move this family through this situation. And interestingly enough, as it turned out, just a couple of weeks ago, the mother called me, and I went over there, and we talked about her car, which was now in my possession, because I had encouraged the woman to go through a driver rehab class. And the daughter delivered the car to me so I could pick up the mother so that she could be road tested in her own car. So the car was now in my possession after this driver rehab class, and the mother wanted it back. And I went over there, and ultimately I gave her the car keys, even though she didn't do all that I wanted her to do, such as go through the Secretary of State now and be tested by the state. So I gave her car keys back. It's her car. I have no right to keep possession of it. And then reported her to the Secretary of State that day. The following day, she spent all day driving. She had just reconciled with her two daughters that weekend. That was on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, the oldest daughter called me and said that her mother had died during the night. So whatever role I was able to play in that, these are the unique kinds of situations and that I find, and the unique kinds of ways that I can intervene in a situation. And the woman had her wish. She had reconciled with her 2 daughters and had her car on the last day of her life. And I had done what I had needed to do in reporting her to the Secretary of State. So I could recount story after story of that nature of the situations that I'm involved with. I really appreciate being asked about my mother in so many ways. My father died when I was 9, and that woman worked at an ironing board for $1 an hour, 12, 14 hours a day, primarily for my benefit. Because I just lost a father, for her to go working full time would have effectively meant I'd lost a mother. And so she did that. And now, all these years later, 45 years later, our positions are kind of reversed. She's the frail elder and the one in need. And she now lives in assisted living. She has been there for 2 years. One of the most agonizing moments of my life was in asking this 80-something-year-old to live someplace other than the home that she had lived in for over 50 years. Because I was living with her at this point, and I'd been caring for her for 15 years up to that point. And she could have remained there, but I was literally on my last day. I couldn't do it anymore. So she went. And much to my amazement, given her lifelong shyness and her severe speech impairment from the stroke, she has adapted well and is doing well in assisted living. In my commitment to her, I decided to see her every day. And I used to think about caregivers who did that they were nuts. You know, get a life. But I do have a life at this point, being freed from the 24/7 responsibility. And I see her every day. It's hard, but I do that. And in January, it saved her life. I found her nearly semi-comatose hours after I'd taken her to the doctor. And she wouldn't have been checked on for another 14 hours, because this was like 6:30 in the evening. She wouldn't have been checked in on until 8 o'clock the next morning. And she would have died by then. Her sugar had plummeted to an emergency level. And so, you know, I had her taken to the hospital, and that all resolved, and she's doing fine now. But one of my current passions is how to be a patient advocate. And one of the most important messages I have in that vein is daily diligence. And so, you know, this story kind of comes full circle. She helped, I don't know if you can call it save my life when I was so young, but she certainly was instrumental in making sure that I got through that time. And now, all these years later, I am playing a very similar role for her. And so we're deeply close to each other. And she has a lot of chronic health problems. She's not in great shape, but she's doing well internally. Always has a smile on her face, always laughing. And so that's how my mother is.